It's Friday, and I'm back with the next in our Fanzine Friday series. Today we're taking a look at Dungeons Chronicle number 6. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer, and this is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Each week on the Fanzine Friday series, we take a fanzine from my collection off the shelf for a closer look. Today, that's Dungeons Chronicle number 6. This is the last one I have. It may be the last one they produced. And it's an excellent fanzine with a lot of content coming in at over 40 pages today. Hope you enjoy the video. Hey my friends, I'm back from vacation and glad to be talking about the last of my Dungeons Chronicle fanzines. This is Dungeons Chronicle number 6. Last one I have. It may be the last one they produced, given some of the comments that are in here. It's on 8.5 by 11 paper on one side. Looks like it's probably photocopied, 2-hole punched. Mine is held together with a binder clip. This is from 1977. On the second page, it is handwritten November of 1977. I don't know for positive that that's accurate, but that seems correct. That certainly indicates it's from 1977 and part of the typed issue. Dungeons Chronicle is produced by a group of gamers from Colombia, Missouri. And they have a couple different names for themselves in here. These guys seem to be a little, don't take themselves all that seriously. It's the Sword and Sorcery or Sword and Magic Society of Missouri. Editors for this issue is Stan Wood, Jim Gibbons, and Fritz Fleming. The publishers, the contributors of each particular article are not indicated anywhere in this. As we've mentioned before, this is put together by their own self-titled Fly-by-Night Press Publications is the publisher. They list in here that they're looking for contributions. As I say, there's an indication that perhaps these guys are sort of running out of enthusiasm to be the ones that have to write everything for their fanzine. They also mention that their circulation is not particularly high, and they haven't been able to get the cost down below $2. And they encourage people, as I mentioned, to put things in here. We'll talk about a couple other things that are coming here as we move forward, but let's take a look at the cover. The cover art is by Mark Sievert, and you see it's got a barbarian here. There's a guy behind him that's got a stake through him or something he's impaled upon. Table of contents is pretty substantial, and this actually isn't even everything. So we'll talk about what's in here. There's an article on attributes, and there's an article on taverns, both names of taverns, a random table for names of taverns, as well as brawls. Get out of the way. Then there's also some fantasy fiction called The Legend of Azol the Damned, a true story, which it clearly is not. We won't talk much about that, but it's fantasy fiction. There's a full-page advertisement they've put in here for their Klutzo Kobold comic. They say they're going to have an actual published product called On the Warpath. That's a collection of a number of Klutzo Kobold comics that you could buy separately. Not sure whether or not that was ever actually produced. I don't have a copy of that. Plant life in your Dungeons and Dragons campaign, so different types of plants you can put in there that could be obstacles for your players. Odd encounter table for wilderness events. How to give the ref a hard time. Defense of psionics. A book review of the Chronicles of Narnia, and they talk about several different ones. Obviously, they like those books. Clarifying wishes, we'll talk about that. Their character report, which is, you remember from before, they talked about the death rate of their characters in their D&D campaign. They have a chart in here for changing the number of monsters that are encountered, basically up or down. Then they've got an example of play in here, which is, basically just a typed out version of a game that's supposedly from their table, although I'm not entirely sure that this is not just made up, given the sense of humor, but can't say for sure. The Barony, which is a discussion of your character getting high enough level to form sort of their own area that they control. A review of the rules for Arduin Grimoire by Dave Hargrave, which they like quite a lot. And in fact, what they say is, in summary, these are rules we would have written if we wrote better and had thought more about what we were trying to put together. Then we've got some new magical spells. There's a limerick, a photograph of these guys. It's because it's photocopied, it's so poor quality, but I think it's a picture of these guys, and you can tell from the photograph they're not particularly old. Looks like maybe high school age kids. They've got a picture of a couple bucks, I think probably the first couple of dollars maybe that they made from their efforts here, as well as copies of the various early edition rule books that they had. An editorial about having an ongoing campaign as opposed to, every night you sit down just doing a one-off adventure. Some rules for climbing sheer walls, some new types of demons for your campaign, a list of the phone numbers, again, updated list of the phone numbers of the people involved here, and then the Klutzo Kobold comic at the back. So a really full table of contents for this issue. And here are the contributors as far as I can tell. Again, there's no attribution made by anybody in this actual articles, and so I can't tell for sure who did exactly what, but these names are in there. As far as I can tell, probably had something to do with the different things that are in this issue. So the attributes table is a fairly common, if you've been watching my videos, this is a pretty common idea that crops up in a lot of different fanzines. And the whole idea here is you roll D100 and you do some unique modification to your characters, right? They've got some phobias in here. They've got things that give you bonuses, extra skills, bonus attribute bonus, etc. And again, some people probably don't like that. I think it adds a little flavor. It gives you just a little something special about your character, and an extra die roll, totally random, can be good, can be bad. All right, so then the next article was on taverns, and first we have just some random names for your taverns, and then there's a system to have tavern brawl, so like large fights, right? And it's just got a system here for you to use to figure out what starts the brawl, how the brawl proceeds, and maybe your characters get caught up in that. All right, so the next article here I like quite a lot, plant life in your Dungeons & Dragons campaign. It talks about a number of different types of plants you could have, and they said, look, we think this is missing. Obviously, if you ever hiked around in the wilderness on your own in real life, coming across different types of plants can be both anything from an annoyance to a benefit to, if you don't know what you're doing and you start eating random plants, I guess that could be particularly deadly. So the first one here is the Black Lotus, and it basically gives off invisible narcotic spores. And if you get too close, you can end up falling asleep as a result of breathing this in. And so either someone else who doesn't fall asleep is going to have to drag you out and help wake you up, or you're just going to have to essentially sleep it off. And you can also harvest this poison if your character knows what he or she is doing. The Yellow Lotus looks very similar. So they say it's more common and it's more of an aphrodisiac that you can harvest and use for that purpose. And it also, if you're using psionics, which I think these guys later articles will talk about they like, it can give you a bonus to your psionics for a period of time. Golden Apple is a special tree, obviously I think drawn from mythology, and because these guys are young teenagers, I think these golden apples help with your virility, and they're highly valued and they're worth a lot of money if you want to harvest them. Crab apples are, exactly what they sound like, but in their version, the crab apple tree is actually sentient, and it'll try to hit you with the limbs of its tree and just sort of cut you up and do a little bit of damage if you get too close. Vampire vines actually drain the blood from your characters if you get tangled up in them, and so they can do a little bit of damage. They have 10 to 100 different little buds, so if you get tangled up in these things, death by 1,000 cuts essentially is what happens. Tangle vines, basically massive thorny vines that, especially if you don't have metal armor, can sort of make it very difficult for you to move. And if you have a big bundle of these, like, you might have to basically force your way around. Horses, mules can't get through, etc. The Athelis is a plant they say comes from Tolkien's books, and it's a healing herb. And clerics would know how to use this, they say, and they can add 1 to 10 points from the herbs they could get from the plant, or they can cure disease. And they say, of course, drawing on those books, rangers also tend to have the ability to know how to use this plant. Mistletoe, which of course is valuable to druids, just straight up spell component. Blood poppies, it says grow whenever there's been a historic battlefield. Nothing special about them. Poison ivy, poison oak, exactly what we've all sort of experienced in real life. But it gives a basically chance to get a rash on you. Probably, have some minus on your rolls, any roll that requires dexterity or concentration for some period of time after that if you get exposed and become itchy. Gully bulbs is a fragile bush, and the seeds will cause an earthquake like a magical spell. So very powerful thing that if you could come across, either have somebody accidentally drop it because they don't know what they're doing and set one off right under their feet, or perhaps learn to use those to some advantage in your game. Hurons, I may be mispronouncing that. It again comes from Tolkien, and it says 1 to 100 can appear. It says these are to Ents as Ents are to humans. They look like trees. Ignoring people, only druids or elves have a chance to recognize them. But if you have an axe out, or even worse, use an axe on a tree in the area, then they're likely to attack. And then finally, we have the giant Venus flytrap, which is the plant that's open. You get inside of it, it snaps shut. They say these would probably be hidden because any player is going to know what that is if they see it. And it's described very, very clearly. All right, that was a long one, but I thought some interesting ideas there I wanted to share. This is an odd encounter table. This is just a D100, just like random stuff that you would encounter along walking through the wilderness, rather than just you walk along the trail, it's a sunny day, there's trees, there's grass, you just roll this and put some stuff in there. It doesn't necessarily have any implication or connection to your campaign, just something interesting to keep the players guessing, or potentially a rabbit hole they end up going down for a half hour or more. All right, so next we have, so I skipped the article about how to be mean to your dungeon master, and it talks about basically one, be assertive and try to make up your own rules that aren't in the real book, but do it with an authoritative voice, and maybe the DM will let you get away with it. Make up rules, change the rules. That's their main piece of advice. Until just basically keep doing that until you get caught. And then they say the third thing essentially you should do is learn to whine and just constantly complain until the ref maybe will give in. So anyway, I skipped that article. Defensive psionics is basically saying they think it's something that a lot of people don't use. I don't use them in my campaign, especially because the chance is so small. You're just as likely almost right to have your characters suffer ill effects if you decide to roll for your psionics rather than getting them, or you're in a campaign where people just basically fudge the rolls and give themselves psionics, and then they're overpowered, I think. And so he's modified the system, and he's got some other basically he makes some basic abilities, superior abilities, and he's got his own system there on how he does that. Then we have a system for clarifying wishes. The way they use it in their campaign, apparently, they make you say your wish on the spot. You have to speak it out loud, and then they tell the DM to count the number of words in the wish. And the more words he uses, the more likely it is that whoever's hearing the wish basically gets bored and won't grant it. On the other hand, if it's a very small number of wishes, it probably lacks enough clarity, and then they encourage the dungeon master to fudge the meaning of the wish and to basically twist it and punish them. My understanding from James Ward is that Gary Gygax's attitude towards wishes was exactly that. He would go to great lengths to not give you what you thought you were asking for. This, I think, is really interesting. I talked about the last time. He has kept track of every character in his campaign and when they died. Of course, most of them have died, right? About 44%. Well, not most. 44% have been killed at this point. And he also tracked their class and what level they died at. And the thing that was sort of interesting here is, clerics and monks, rangers tend to die at first level, fighters and thieves at second, and magic users at third. I'd sort of chalk that up to the idea that magic user just completely hides and runs away when it only has one hit point or one hit die. By the time it gets to third, I guess it's brave enough and it gets near combat, But I think it's always the case. Magic user takes one hit, they're gonna be a goner. 78% of their thieves did not survive, so they were the most likely to end up not surviving. And he says, assassins, we don't have enough. They only had 4. Rangers really only had 6, so they said they weren't really enough for statistical sample. Magic users, surprisingly, is the class that tends to survive the best. I take that because the magic user probably knows not to be part of combat, right? That's the most likely explanation in my book. Then he's got this little chart to increase the number of monsters that appear in a random encounter. He basically says the larger your party, then the more people you need in your random encounter. So he's got a chart that takes the number of players, 0 doesn't obviously, down to 6 or 7, and then basically he adds more. He has a chart there to figure out how to add more, and then he also has a chart for whoever you would encounter if you encounter humanoids, what they might have on them in the encounter. So this art is by Mark Sievert, just like the cover. So here's the example of their referee moderated dungeon. It's just like the same thing we've seen in later editions of the D&D rule set, where they actually just list the typed discussion there. We've got the Barony, the much neglected and part of the game, where you can create your own sort of fiefdom in your home campaign world. And so here they sort of give you their thoughts on that. They've got some new magical spells. I like these. These are pretty good. Simple. Spectre Mount gives the magic user an invisible horse for 12 hours. And I guess he can either see it or sense that nobody else can. Other than that, it's just a normal light horse in terms of movement, what it can hold. It does get tired, etc., and then just pushes out of existence. The next is first level spell. The next first level spell is called Understand Language. The magic user can understand any spoken language of one other creature, and he can communicate back with it for the duration of the spell, 12 turns. Finally, this is an excellent spell. Spell of Warning gives a 1.5 inch, so 15 feet, 15 yards outside circle around the magic user that is sort of invisible radius. If anything that has ill intent, whether it be a bear that's hungry that is coming in to look for something to eat, or a humanoid creature that's coming in to try and stab somebody, anything passes through that barrier, it will wake the magic user up and he'll know where the threat's coming from. So good spell, and like the kind of spell you'd cast right before you went to sleep for the night. And then a second level spell called Duplicate, which duplicates any non-magical basic item. Can't duplicate a potion, poisons, like I said, anything enchanted, but anything simple you can basically duplicate it. Climbing and falling from walls, we just have a chart here, we get some modifications based on a few things, and if you fall, then they've got distance anywhere from 10 feet to over 200 feet, and the amount of damage that you would suffer. Then they've got a nice article on demons, and if you remember, these guys are around. This is the original wood grain white box rules, right? The three booklets, and then you had supplements called a Greyhawk, Blackmore, and then Eldritch Wizardry was the third supplement, and it introduced demons, which, if you're familiar with AD&D, right, you've got type 1, type 2, type 3, 4, 5, and 6. So they introduced their own creations, type 7, 8, 9, 10, and the LOS. And they have these different type of monsters in here. They have their, get myself out of the way, they have their, here's some drawings, stats and description of their different types of attacks and ability to gate in other creatures, magic resistance, magic spells, all those kind of things. So pretty cool. Derek Young here has got the artwork. I love the artwork. And then we have the Klutzo Kobold comic, which has been in here for several, all the issues really. And then they have a little extra one-page comic here called The Adventures of Wood and Palmer's Apartment. And that's it for Dungeon Chronicle number 6. As I said, this is the last one I have. It may very well be the last one that these guys did. Other things I'm looking for, they had a rule set called Winches and Wine Kegs that I'm going to try and find. There's some very brief comment about them getting in trouble with TSR over that, so I'd love to find one of these guys and learn that story. Allegedly, the Klutzo Kobold comic booklet was published in the local gaming store, so that's something fun to look for. And certainly if there's anything else that was put out by these guys, I'd love to find it and learn more about them, because I sort of feel like there's a connection to this little group. I felt like I had the connection to the personality of the gamers who put this out more than anything else I've seen. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to be doing obviously something new next week. I'm looking forward to that, and maybe do some other videos here in the next couple of weeks to try and get back in the groove. Hope you guys are having a great summer. Hope you enjoyed today's video. And until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.